an answer to my questions in your Genesis.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'm a believer, not a fool. I think, I ask myself. It's not because I affirm the existence of Allah that all my questions are automatically answered. Who is behind this incredible work? Behind the visible world and the invisible world? Behind the world of the elementary particles? The creation is so wonderful. If it had no sense, it would be absurd.
For believers, God stands in and for the beginning of the world. In this point, Jews, Christians, and Muslims are united. But today, is it possible to believe that God is the originator of the world? Is it compatible with today's scientific knowledge? With our mind, our brain, our intellect, is it still possible to believe that the world was created in only 6 days, as per Surah 11, or Genesis chapter 1?
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. These are the first words of the creation story. The prelude of the Old Testament. In the first chapter, it's told how the world emerged, how life came to earth. God created first the heaven and the earth, the sun, the moon, stars, the plants and the animals. And at last, to fulfill his creation, humans, everything in 6 days, because on the 7th day, God rested.
Genesis is the result of a very old mythology. In the 7th century CE, these stories were even assumed by the Quran, and these ideas unite Abrahamic monotheism. The creation story should serve us as a guide.
This text unleashes an internal process. It is a text made for confrontation.
The creation story is a text that invites us to look at the world, the diversity, and the beauty of the world. The stars, the sun, the moon, the planets, and the manifold. The story is also an invitation to look at ourselves, to look at us as the rarity we are. Already, Genesis talks about the difficulty of our interpersonal relationships. The Genesis story is a pedagogical help for us humans.
These texts are pre-scientific. We can deduce from them that things were created in a specific order. Life cannot exist if there is no light. Life cannot be if the waters from above the vault are not separated from the waters under the vault. If the land and water are not separated, if not first nature, the trees and the grass, if not created first so that subsequently the animals can be created, then nothing will have a sense. Only after all this has been created, day after day, can the human being appear.
Is the Genesis a pre-science tale? Confusing that God first created the universe, then life, and afterwards people. So, in the right order, in the order of science.
This is because the writers of Genesis were inspired by the surrounding cultures, including cultures that predate the first Hebrews, especially by the Assyrians, Babylonians, Sumerians, Hittites, Canaanites, Egyptians, and even the Greeks when referring to the New Testament. The mythologies in Genesis chapters 1 through 4, as well as various surahs in the Quran, can easily be traced to mythology of the 3rd and 2nd millennium cultures according to the archaeological evidence. These people watched the sky, they observed the movement of the stars, calculated and predicted solar and lunar eclipses, and tried to create predictions around this, hence astrology. The creation myths of the Bible and Quran reflect in many ways these prior creation myths, minus the epic battles and squabbling among gods. This approach was later taken by the monotheistic kings of Judah long before Islam, kings such as Hezekiah and Josiah. This position is supported by the Bible and the Book of Kings for Christians and Jews, and all of you know that. And there are also animals that came into being after the first humans, including various salamanders and reptiles. Are we to understand the greatest creation was the last creation, since this is what was implied, meaning that humans are not the greatest creation? Your reasoning is absurd.
Genesis is the result of a very old mythology. In the 7th century CE, these stories were even assumed by the Quran, and these ideas unite Abrahamic monotheism. The creation story should serve us as a guide.
And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters.
So God created directly after the first day the heaven and the earth, our planet. But how exactly and out of what?
The Bible doesn't tell us that there was nothing at the beginning. It says God established order from chaos. He, that is God, orders this helter-skelter existence.
Yes, Surah Al-Anbiya in the Quran suggests that the world as we know it today, the universe, was in the beginning one piece that was then split asunder.
And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. A primeval chaos, a darkness, and so it's told, the light is being raised, and afterwards life. Can this probably have something to do with the teachings of the scientists and with the famous Big Bang?
There is a spot at the beginning which has everything inside them. It is small, like a pinhead, and from this little pinhead comes everything. And this is very near to the fact that God created everything.
I don't see necessarily a Big Bang, but otherwise there is no confrontation between the Quran's creation story and the Big Bang. This is the smallest common denominator where we can agree on, because the Big Bang theory will probably also evolve, because theories are evolving. Therefore, I cannot lay this theory in God's mouth. If the theory evolves, I make God will seem like a liar. God cannot make such a mistake. This is the dogmatic start point. God cannot be wrong.
Does the Big Bang justify itself, or is it justified by an external cause? I mean, I don't believe that the world justifies itself. I believe that the world has been created by a previous cause, the first cause ever, the cause of all causes by God Himself, respectively, by whom we call God.
God as the cause of the Big Bang.
Yes, this was our perception at the Vatican when this 20th century theory was originally formulated. The original idea of this cosmic egg comes from one of our priests who in the same time was a scientist, Father George Lemaitre.
Yes, it's a fact that it was Catholic theologian and priest who later became a Monsignor, but first he was a professor of the University of Louvain in Belgium. He was critical of using this discovery for theological purposes, and was even critical of the Pope for attempting to do so. That was Pope Pius XII. Lemaitre was pretty clear when he said that, as far as I can see, such a theory remains entirely outside any metaphysical or religious question.
Only you would misuse the Big Bang as proof of God's non-existence. With the Big Bang, you can only prove how it began, but never what has been the cause of it. How everything began is not a thing of proof, but a thing of faith.
Meanwhile, it seems that the Church has settled this problem with the Big Bang. The official statement from the Vatican's observatory:
The Big Bang stays as the best explanation for the origin of the universe. The Big Bang theory is not in opposition with the Catholic faith.
And God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. In the Genesis, God created the world in only 6 days. Strange when you know that science tells you that the Earth is 4.7 billion years old. Is God's time maybe not the same time as ours? Are we permitted to do this collation? Has God really created the world in only 6 days?
The word day, it has a certain relativity. Even in Hebrew, it can mean a 24-hour period, a workday, the time in which we have daylight. So why not also describe a period of some thousands of years? This use of the word day, in my eyes, and in the view of faith, is not a relevant nor a fundamental problem. We can believe in God and practice religion, and on the other side take the position that the world is several billion years old. If this is proven by science, we can follow science in this point.
I don't see the Genesis as historical text in the sense that I try to date the successive events in a proper chronological order. Maybe they happen in 6 24-hour days, maybe in 6 days which took an eternity of billions of years. In the beginning is a myth. I mean, a long time before us, in a time when people tried to explain their presence and the presence of the earth, and gave these explanations when it wasn't possible in music, in word, poem, and story.
Also in the Quran, the matter of time causes difficulties. In Surah 7, 10, 11, and 25, the Quran says heaven and earth are created in 6 days, but in Surah 41, it states 8 days. This is one of the smallest problems of time in the Quran. There is no such discrepancy in the Bible.
The Quran speaks in one chapter of a day which is corresponding of 1,000 days, then about a day corresponding to 50,000 years. So really, is the day a relative sentence? What will the Quran teach us with this? Through Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, we know that time is relative. So the dating is dependent, the conditions in space and time. In the creation story, God creates the world in 6 days. And at the end of every day, one sentence is repeated every time. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning, the next day. In the 3 first days there were no stars. How is this possible? How can we speak about days without the sun? And the plants were created at the 3rd day.
Yes, I know, in the Bible the plants were created on the 3rd day and the sun on the 4th day. You might ask how this goes together with the chlorophyll production. To have trees, we need a sun. For me, this only means that the Bible doesn't follow the chronological events.
Plants are growing even though there is no sun.
Do you think this is the only issue of chronology? Not only is the sun created after plants, but there is the second creation event in Genesis chapter 2 that you're ignoring. Not only does Genesis chapter 1 conflict chronologically with what is known about the seeds and plants, but the creation event in Genesis chapter 2 is in chronological conflict with Genesis chapter 1, even if scientific findings didn't conflict with Scripture. Take Copernicus and Galileo, astronomers and men of the Church. In the 16th century, Copernicus showed that the Earth is not at the center of the universe, and Galileo continued this. They proved Ptolemy wrong. Galileo dared challenge the Catholic Church and was almost killed for it. They ruined his life when he was right. Martin Luther called Copernicus a fool over this. About 1,400 years later, it seems the fool was Martin Luther. The founders of Christianity are denialists of reality.
Since Copernicus, the origin of the world is shown in a completely other light. This new other light seemed being the complete opposite of what the Bible is telling us and what we believe for thousands of years. The questions were not allowed. People who wrote in the sense of Copernicus were placed on the index of forbidden books. Professors were dismissed, or worse, they were censored and delivered to the Inquisition, because these questions were forbidden and it was not even allowed to discuss. This brought the Vatican Church to a blockade of problems they could not solve, and just began increasing their problems.
Also in the Islamic world, there flares a fire between the 8th and 10th centuries when scientific observations conflict with religious readings and become a fierce controversy.
A very long time ago, the view that dominated the world was that only a limited universe could meet the majesty of God. The Persian astronomer Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Kathir al-Farani had on his mind the Ptolemaic worldview and calculated the distance that separates us from the throne of God. His result was 120 million of today's kilometers. This was in the Middle Ages, the extent of the universe. Only in the Renaissance came doubts about this extent of the universe. Some thought the universe must be very big. Today, some think it is infinite.
Like Copernicus, whose teachings were completely discarded by the church after his death.
And Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn Rushd, he turned the Arab world upside down in the 12th century. He was the defender of the sciences. His crime was to claim that religion has to bow under the evidence of scientific discoveries.
That is true. Averroes was a defender of science and supporter of Aristotle, but you forgot Ghazali, who was opposed to Aristotle and classical Greek philosophy. Averroes was able to demolish Ghazali's book Incoherence of the Philosophers, but Ghazali remained influential nonetheless, and after a crisis of faith, turned to Islamic mysticism. Around the same time, Ibn Taymiyyah rejected rationalism in philosophy, and his works helped influence what would have become the Wahhabis, Islam of Saudi Arabia. Would you like to go down that road? Since this time, many things have changed, and everyone can live their faiths openly. Just kidding. No, they can't.
The message of the Quran is not a textbook of physics, but rather a message to understand the sense of the world.
In the Genesis, God, after creating heaven and earth, brings forth the sun, the moon, the plants, the animals to creation. We are at the 5th and the 6th day, and God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beasts of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creeped on the earth after his kind. So that it was good.
Again, you see that in Genesis, God takes a lot of time to classify. With the animals, he takes care to separate the kinds from each other. You see, he distinguishes the animals from the sea accurately from the animals from the earth, as well as those from the skies. Again, you see that everything is in its place.
Classify? This is actually a simplification. In taxonomy, you can't get any more generalized than plants and animals. And they are kingdoms. And stars also have distinct classifications, so we can categorize them. A yellow star like ours is nothing like a neutron star, but yet they both are stars because of very general characteristics. Can you please define for me what a kind is? But so believe the humans that animals stayed unchanged for centuries. Until Charles Darwin became a problem for you.
In the year 1859, English naturalist Charles Darwin published his groundbreaking work on the origin of species. His findings are absolutely contrary to the Bible stories. The various species are descended from each other and are dependent on the environment to survive. If the environment changes and they don't, they die. Today, only some fundamentalist religious fanatics are doubting this fact. Creationists.
We would not have such problems if it were not for people like Adnan Akhtar, or as he prefers to be known, his con artist name Harun Yahya. He agrees that the Earth is 4.7 billion years old, but wants to prove that all animals have been created as they live today, without any kind of evolution. In Islam, we don't have a single credo for everyone, but rather religious authorities who have also a bad look on our extremist brothers. Evolution doesn't contradict the Quran. In some chapters, the Quran even speaks about a cyclic evolution of mankind.
Darwin was not only interested in animals, but also in humans. He was the first who brought animals and humans in the same mechanism of evolution. He himself said that this was his biggest crime, as bad as murder, a murder on your God. Copernicus chased the Earth out of the middle of the universe, and now Darwin gives us the needed evidence to prove that humans are animals. Science has taken over the sanctum.
But we, the humans, are God's everything's finished work. The crown of the creation. in the biblical creation story, we humans, He created at last. It's the sixth day, and God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth.
In the second chapter of Genesis, the man is created from the matter. His name is Adam, which in Hebrew means he who comes from the earth.
The Quran also says that the first man came from matter. In the Quran, it's water, clay, and semen that plays the main role, but the creation story of Islam never goes in detail. The question of the origin of life has been transfigured religiously because of decency.
In the Bible, man is the fulfillment of the creation, a fully developed living form, the perfect creature, the image of God. So God created man in His own image. In the image of God created He him. Male and female created He him.
But we humans are not a finished work. We're constantly changing at the genetic level, and we can prove it. As a result, to say that we're fulfillment of anything is factually wrong, and to imply perfection is on shaky ground even theologically, original sin and all. Science has retraced our origins. Remember the tree of life. We're just a branch of this tree growing out of it tens of thousands or even millions of years ago.
But how can I believe in God and in the same time in evolution? And how is this with those apes? The first man, has he looked like an ape? Or maybe was he an ape? That's what science tells us.
Islam doesn't dislike apes. Maybe there are some Muslims who don't like them. The ape, the monkey, are absolutely normal animals. I ask sometimes what is worse, that to be built from stinking clay, how the Quran describes it, or to descend from apes.
If the human being really descends from the ape, this means only that God decided that one ape race be more intelligent than others. That they learn to walk upright and become human. This doesn't disturb me, not very much. It takes nothing from my human pride. If from the ape something so wonderful has evolved that it can feel compassion, then this is a wonder. A wonder of God, the creator of all life.
I believe that with us humans, God has created something truly exceptional. We are the fruit of God's will. Maybe, yes, we resemble some animals, but that is only because God wanted us not to differ too much from the rest of creation. But man is unequivocally more than just a higher developed ape. An ape is an ugly creature, but we are evolved from apes, and are evolving into some unknown species is a bleak idea. What kind of life would that be without the hope of eternal bliss, without the confidence to reach heaven?
In the 19th century, Darwin's teachings encountered very heavy resistance in all of our thousands of different churches. Even today it's still dynamite, and this to the highest circles of the Vatican.
Unfortunately, the position from all the Roman authorities is not clear. It's ambiguous. On one side, they can't deny that this evolution took place, but on the other side, they always want to smuggle some theological arguments inside to keep a link to their traditional roots.
Our Pope says we are more than the random and senseless product of evolution, and every one of us is the fruit of God's thought. The human being is more than the totality of his organs and the connection of his DNA. Pope Benedict XVI recognizes evolution.
Random and senseless? That's nonsense. Even if it was random and senseless, it would not be science, as it would be unpredictable. The Darwinian concept of evolution has been proven accurate, and we understand evolution better than gravity. Darwin did not believe that life is only a sequence of arbitrary coincidences. This is why it's called natural selection and not natural randomness. The fact remains we are not, quote, more than highly developed ape. We're an ape regardless of opinion of beauty and ugliness.
In Genesis, man became something more than all other living being. The soul, the breath of life. In Genesis, man is made from the dust of the earth, but only through his breath he awakes into life. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul.
Religion has a very complex image of mankind, but it does not reduce us on our body, but recognizes a dimension in us who goes far over this concept. This dimension is called the breath, or the spirit, or the soul.
The soul, an imagination which connects all the believers of the world. Since the beginning of humanity, man ponders over the significance of this notion. Philosophers of ancient Greece were fascinated in this concept: Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Like the philosophers, the three monotheistic religions believe that the soul is the very essence of life. For them, the soul can do much more. It is their connection to God and exists inseparable from them.
There is something mystic that God gave us for our journey. It's the spirit, or the breath. Only this breath makes us what we really are. This breath lets us recognize God, because with our own human power, we were not able to do so. A lump of clay would not be able to recognize God without his breath. This distinguishes us from all other life on this earth.
After the existence of God, the creation of man is the next big mystery. In the center of creation, as well as the center of the universe, lies the human being. From the beginning, everything turns around these questions. See Psalm 8, because the psalm is a narration of Genesis.
What is man that thou art mindful of him, and the Son of Man that thou visitest him? For thou hast made him a little lower than angels, and hast crowned him with glory and honor.
Yes, the psalmist noted here that it's very special to be human. That man is merely a godlike being. That man writes his own tragedies and then performs them. This is the second secret, and also the place where doubt can grow.
What a piece of work man is, how noble in reason, how infinite in faculties. In form and moving, how expressive and admirable, in action, how like an angel, in apprehension, how like a god. The real irony in Hamlet is we can be capable of this. The question is it a blessing or a curse? The psalmist is not far removed in this idea. He speaks of human dignity as he does say we are a little lower than God and crowned with honor and glory with dominion over his creation. But the so-called mystery of man is no mystery. We have a good idea how it really happened through science, how people came into existence, and man is not the center of the so-called creation or the universe. The problem with the psalmist is one small virus can destroy us. One large disaster, and we can be brought to extinction. It would not be a first. The psalmist is right in our dignity, but wrong in sovereignty. We are both glory and tragedy. Every movement of science removes one mystery, but exposes another. And then there's the mystery of the so-called soul. If we ever discover what the so-called soul is, what will you do? If you claim it is beyond knowing, how do you know it exists in the first place? Is this frontier a little too far? After all, it was Pope John Paul II who told Stephen Hawking not to study the beginning of the universe. What is he afraid of? The loss of faith?
Meanwhile, it seems that the church has settled this problem with the Big Bang. Fucking fly.
Bug. Bug. Bug on my monitor. Bug dead on my monitor. A bug died on my monitor. I don't know what to do about this. It's such a shame.
I'm a slot!
Part 8, Helter Skelter. Part 29, Helter Skelter. Part 36, Helter Skelter. Part 60, Helter Skelter.
The Big Bang stays as the best explanation for the origin of the universe.
Your reasoning is absurd. Your reasoning is absurd. That is true. Avoros. Your reasoning is absurd.
Oh, damn it. It's simple. It's hard to read in these glasses, they're very thick. I'm gonna do that first speech again. Just to make sure.
Anyway, I gotta get going to work. I hope you have yourselves a good day.
So, yeah, have a good week. And try not to hate each other too much. It's self-defeating.